This is Profit from the Inside with Joel Block. Insights to give your business the inside track. And now, here's your host, Joel Block.
How often do you wonder how to best tell your company's story in a way that engages and motivates the best prospects and customers to keep them moving forward with your company? To answer that question, Rasha Drachkovitch. Rasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joel. Happy to be on.
Listen, man, you are legendary in Los Angeles. I mean, you're somebody who has created many of these reality shows. My favorite one that you've produced, by the way, is Lockup. I just think that watching these prison shows, because it helps me stay on the straight line, by the way, just it's kind of that Scared Straight thing from when we were kids. They used to do that program. And that's kind of what your show does. But it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So tell me something, just real quick. What are some of the big shows in your lineup that you've produced over the many years?
Well, Lockup was on 20 years on MSNBC. Glad you mentioned it. It's one of the most difficult shows to do, and yet one of the most rewarding. And a lot of fans out there like Dwayne Johnson, Mark Wahlberg. So it's kind of funny how it reached out to a whole community that followed the show. We've done Wahlburgers on A&E, Nightwatch, Hollywood Medium, True Story of Black Hawk Down. We've been doing shows, Pit Bulls and Parolees on Animal Planet. It's really, since June of 1984, which is a few moons ago, we've been fortunate, Joel, to have a show on the air every year and have been able to make payroll every Friday. And that's not an easy thing to do in a business like television that has changed dramatically over 4 decades. But that's our story.
So let's just talk, just because not everybody understands how the production business works, the TV business works. Your company produces the shows. So do you buy scripts? Do people pitch you on their ideas? Just tell us where you fit in the big puzzle of television production.
So 44 Blue Productions, name of our company, we produce non-scripted programming. So think of documentaries, reality shows, anything that doesn't have actors or scripts, or, they're not films. They're what you would find pretty much on basic cable, the HBOs, the Discovery Channels, the A&Es. We're content providers, right? So we come up with ideas, develop them, pitch them like you would pitch any product. And then, fingers crossed, the network executive will go, I want one of those. And you work out a budget and a calendar and off you go into production. And with the hopes that you get ratings. Ratings are eyeballs. Eyeballs are viewers who may or may not, like the product that we create. And if we get enough people watching, our ratings are high, then you get a show like Lockup that could get picked up every year. So we're content providers.
Let me understand how this works. So do you produce the show first on spec, or do you get the commitment from the network or the cable channel to run it and advance you some money? How does that work?
Yeah, so we produce on spec the materials, like the sizzle reel. Think of it as like a promo tape, proof of concept, the deck, which is basically a PowerPoint presentation, anything and everything that we could put together to form a pitch of an idea. The actual production gets funded by the network. So that could be anywhere on the low end. Let's say in the home and garden space, they might spend a couple $100,000 per episode, all the way up to, let's say, Fox or HBO, and they're going to spend upwards to $1 million per episode. So they pay for the production of the show, but initially it's our currency that gets into it.
So you kind of come up with the concept, and where do your concepts come from? Do people bring them to you, or are they just done at a table in your office?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's 3 ways. One is it's internally developed by our development team, and our development team comes up with it from reading the papers or blogs or finding concepts and so on. 2 is outside producers can come in. Joel, you could come in with an idea to say, hey, I think we should do a documentary on the Dodgers or something like that, and then we'll partner with you to make that show. And then 3 is a network will call us because of our relationship with them, and they'll say, hey, we've got this idea. We need a production company to execute it. 44 Blue, will you do that? So those are the 3 steps.
Okay, so somebody brings you a show, let's say, or you come up with an idea, you produce the preliminary materials, you take it to the network, to a net. It's the network, that's what it is, and they say, we like it. Here's the money for 13 shows. They'll give you 13 shows worth, let's say, here's 1 or 2 pilots, and whatever you'll make 1 or 2, whatever it is they agree to, and then you run it. And your profit is the spread between what they advance and what you do it for?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we our profits are in the executive producer fees. That's basically to manage the show, right? Our profits are in the back end. The show might sell internationally, or it might become a podcast, or it might have other ancillary revenue streams. International marketplace is very big for some of our shows, and basically that's the margin that we have that we would consider profits.
What makes for a great show? I mean, when do you recognize a great show when you hear it? I mean, you have pretty high pitch rate when you go to the networks, or what is that? What is that whole sense of like?
The pitch rate is pretty high. I would say you need about 10 projects to maybe sell 1 or 2, and that's just because you can't tell. The trends change all the time, and viewing patterns. I don't know if you remember back in the day, but there was this crazy show called Duck Dynasty on A&E, and everybody in town was trying to find guys with beards who did crazy things. That was a phenomenal hit for 3-4 years, and then went away, and the networks wanted nothing to do with guys with beards unless they were looking for gold up in Alaska or something. So trends change all the time, and basically our ability to kind of identify those trends and figure out what viewers are interested in. It is a copycat business, so when a show pops a rating, you're going to find 10 different, spin-offs of that on different networks, because it's this, simplest form of trying to get to success.
So that's pretty cool. That, I've really kind of, even as somebody from Los Angeles, and we know a lot of people in all of our neighborhoods are in the studio business, and a lot of them are vendors, either camera people, or they supply paint, or they, whatever it is. But it's interesting to hear this. Hey, I've always heard that the saying is reality TV is anything but. So how much truth is there? And I guess there's different genres of reality, like like you say, there's no script, but there's enough of a script that a lot of people get trapped into some weird stuff. So just what happens?
Yeah, it's kind of the R word, reality TV. We sometimes it becomes kind of a stigma to the industry. How much of it's real, how much of it's scripted, and so on. And there are certain shows where, it is basically, a scripted drama. People are given lines, and they have to read them, and so on. I find the 2 components to make for a great reality show are cast and access, right? If you get a great cast that's original, like the show we do called Pit Bulls and Parolees. This is a woman who rescues pit bulls and hires parolees, and it's been on now for 16 seasons on Animal Planet. Not one thing is scripted. It is as real as it can be, because you don't need to create drama. And I think some shows that don't have organic drama or organic comedy, have to rely on, let's just call them gimmicks of the trade that they have to come up with shtick or, copy to, create a fake fight scene or something like that. We're really trending toward, and have been, looking for those cast and access, like Lockup. There are no second takes in Lockup, Joel. Like, it is real. That what you saw on those shows is 100%. You can't ask an inmate to go back inside the cell, or can you release them and then bring them back in, So I think audiences are pretty sophisticated about, reality of reality, what shows are just, kind of guilty pleasures, and they're going to watch them because you're just for the ride of seeing the housewives of some city battle it out. Or do you really want to get into a meaty, Netflix crime, episode, whodunit, that is based upon real detectives, real evidence, and so on. So that's kind of the split in our business in terms of what's real and what isn't.
The listeners of this show are business executives from middle-sized and larger companies. So let's try and adapt some of the things that you're talking about, about cast, pitching, access, every single one of those things. I mean, as a longtime businessman, not in your business, but in other business, I can relate to those things. I mean, our cast is our staff, right? I mean, and our the people that create curiosity and pitch are our salespeople. I mean, so we kind of parallel what you do, and maybe even more than parallel, and maybe we both have the same things. How does some of the things that you've seen, that you do for your business apply inside your business? You see what I'm saying? Like, let's talk about some of those parallels.
Well, from a creative standpoint, you have to have curiosity. You just mentioned it. It's what makes for a real successful producer. The curiosity to find stories, to dig deeper. You read something, an article, a blog, something comes across the way, like, hey, that might make for a good show. That, person or that place or that idea could make for a good show. That's what drives our development team. And that team comes up with ideas that we have to then, as we talked about, go out and pitch and sell. The other side of our business is kind of, the nuts and bolts of the business, our post-production team, our production camera team, our, legal, accounting, all the other elements that, most businesses have. They keep us, humming. And especially, with the challenges today of how do you film these shows, some of them very complicated, in a pandemic, necessity is the mother of invention. So we've turned to kind of our, the core base of the company to figure out how do we produce these shows while our development team goes out and comes up with these great ideas and pitches them, and in some cases sells them. You have to have the other end of basically, the engine room to figure out, how do we power them and make them work,
Well, right. So your production room is like a plant. I mean, that's like where the companies do their assembly lines or whatever they have. It's their inventory and all their stuff. So, I mean, there's a tremendous parallel between your business, even though all the language, the nomenclature is all different. The ideas are virtually identical and parallel. It's a funny thing you bring up curiosity, because to me, the media is so great at curiosity. Some of us are pretty good at it, but the media is fantastic at it. You watch TV. Tornadoes touch down in Los Angeles. We'll show you where at 11. And you got to be kidding. Exactly. Tornadoes touch. I got to see that. I got to find out where it is. And they bring you in. And I think that businesses could learn to do that better in their sales pitches, in their emails, in their voicemails that they send out, and in any of their correspondence. They could learn. Is there like a trick to it, or is it just something that you just kind of catch on to?
No, there's no real trick to it. I think kind of getting back to like good ideas. What makes a good idea? One of your original questions is it's really kind of at the core. Is it authentic? And then I have to say, we've got basically 25 buyers that make up our universe. So that's not a lot. There's 1,000 channels out there. Our relationships with those 25 buyers, and a lot of them change, they basically rotate, they're temporary people making permanent decisions because your executives kind of come and go, but the network still stays. We've got 25 cracks at this, and not every show, what we would pitch, let's say an idea that we're excited about to an HBO might be very different for, HGTV, right? So our buyer base is only 25. So our ability to be kind of broad and yet specific, if that makes any sense, to tailor toward those networks really is the fine line between our success and failure.
Well, I want to come back to the curiosity thing for just a minute, but before I do that, I just want to ask you this one question: how do you maintain relationships where the buyer is changing all the time? Because a lot of people who are in sales departments notice that about corporate organizations is their person changes right out from under them and then their whole opportunity evaporates. So how do you maintain a relationship with the mothership, even though the captain of the ship or the whoever the guys are changing?
So it's basically protecting your brand, right? So every company, every producer, and I say this to a lot of people getting into the business, they ask for tips and advice. I tell them, listen, think of yourself as a brand. What do you represent? What are you known for, right? What's 44 Blue known for? So we take great pride to protect our brand, which is, we do quality programming. We can do it at an affordable price, right? We have a very good reputation in town. We don't burn bridges. We play well with partners and so on. So that as executives come and go, if our brand stays strong, our reputation will, in some ways precede us to the next group that comes in with the next big idea at the network. That's a little bit of our strategy or secret sauce, is to figure out, how do we maintain that reputation? Because that's what it is. There's nothing else. If you burn a bridge in this business, it's too small. Very hard to get back into the cycle of who's working and who's not. We work really hard on maintaining that.
You produce TV shows. You ever tempted to do a full-length feature film or something else? I mean, because you put yourself in a box. And I imagine that's worked out good for you, but have you ever been tempted to leave the box and go do something else?
Well, we did a film in 1995 called Journey to Mars, and it was on CBS, and I was thrilled because it had an amazing cast: Dean Jones, Judge Reinhold, and it was with Fred Silverman, and it was for the major network like CBS, and it became the second lowest rated film in television history. So that knocked the film out of me, right?
I'm sitting here thinking, I can't remember ever hearing of that.
It's okay. It's actually got a subculture, a group out there that love it. It's kind of like one of those Plan B from outer space, so bad it's good, But
it sounds like it's got maybe a little bit of Rocky Horror.
Yeah, exactly. A cult classic, let's say. But that got back to, I found the most interesting stories. If we're storytellers as a core, the most interesting stories are real. And how do we tell them well? That's really at the base of what we do.
How much of technology changing has affected your business? In other words, I watched, if you remember this from the 60s, there was a movie called Fantastic Voyage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this incredible science fiction movie where they injected a little submarine into a guy's body to go through his bloodstream and fix a problem in his brain. And I remember as a little kid, I thought it was the most incredible thing ever. Then I watched it a couple of years ago and I thought, oh my God, you got to be, But the thing was that, like the backdrops, it was like they had like tin foil, and you could see the tin foil, and they had like paint. You could see where it was terrible. It was just terrible. But at that time, it was like, oh my God, it's like the greatest thing ever. So how much is that technology has enhanced your ability, or made it more difficult for you? Which one?
No, the best advice I got a long time ago was, don't worry about technology because it's going to change. Unless you're in the tech field where, your 2K, 3K, 4K cameras are going to change every year. You're a content producer. So what you put in the box, whether it's a postage stamp or whether it's a flat screen the size of, Southern California, you've got to come up with quality content. And, that has kept us pretty grounded. Our operations side has to go to, the conventions like NAB, and they have to know what the latest and greatest, and hey, there's a faster, better, all of that for sure.
So your production teams are paying attention to that.
They have to know the state of the art.
But you really bifurcate the technology people from everybody else. So everybody else is really focused on content.
Yeah.
And you just give those other guys a budget for buying new equipment.
Yeah, we have to maintain the look, so we don't have the coat of paint in the corners that you're talking about from Fantastic Voyage. we have to stay current to make sure that our shows look premium, and that's the word of the week. But we don't spend a ton of time doing that. We spend much more time finding out what are we going to put in the box. The huge revolution that's not even new anymore has been, the streamers, right? And there used to be a saying, content is king, right? So what you make is king. And that's changed in the last 5 years to convenience is king. Basically meaning you don't have to wait till Saturday night at 9, 10, and 11 o'clock to watch Lockup. You can watch it anytime you want and control your viewing, right? And that was the explosion of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all the rest. And if you saw just recently, the Discovery Channel came up, they are the kings of cable. Discovery, between all the channels that they have, just came out last week with a new product called Discovery Plus. Real original thinking there.
Yeah, I wonder how many people had to work on that deal.
Right, exactly. A staff of 30. I got it. Let's call it Discovery Plus. But anyway, really, bells and whistles presentation, looks amazing. But it's basically they lost cable. Basically, it was the first big shot at the end of cable. Conventional cable, and Discovery now is moving into the streaming world because they lost 30% of their viewers based upon the convenience is king model. Everybody cut cords or is watching at their, hey, let's see what's on Netflix. Hey, let's see what's on Amazon, and not having to wait for, it seems archaic now to think you have to wait for a day to watch a show at a time. So that's been seismic shift in our business right now.
Yeah. You may not know this, but in 1992, actually 1990, me and another guy created the concept of delivering stock quotes to investors by fax. So you didn't have to wait till tomorrow to get the newspaper.
Wow.
You didn't have to read through 11,000 entries. You told us what 20 or 30 you wanted to pay attention to, and we faxed them to you within a half an hour of the stock market closing on the same day. So we shaved like 18 hours off the process. So it's funny that you bring that up. I never really thought that the same cycle is kind of happening. We're kind of collapsing this cycle, of people's attention span. And that we did that a long time ago, and we noticed the same thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. That's the direction we're heading in right now. But again, it goes back to full cycle to content and technology. You still need to find interesting products for people to browse. I mean, who would have thought Tiger King would be a huge hit? But, during a pandemic, we all sat around watching this crazy guy, with tigers, and, became kind of a national phenomena. But, whether you like it or not, it was different enough that, we had in The Last Dance was fantastic. I don't know if you saw that on ESPN. It was the
Michael Jordan
Bulls
deal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You had a captive audience because of the pandemic, and there were no sports at the time. It's when the NBA shut down and nothing was going on. And then you had this beautifully, I think it was 8 to 10 part series on, one of the greatest dynasties of all time. So content still is a driving force. And as long as we can produce it at an affordable price, going back to the original,
I would thinking about content is king versus convenience is king. Mm-hmm. I would still bet on content because convenience is a modality. It's a flavor of the day. Today we're doing internet, tomorrow we're doing satellite, the day after that we're doing something else, but the content still survives. I understand you recently sold your company or sold part of your company in the last handful of years. They didn't buy the convenience. They bought the content because they could stream it or move it or do with it and monetize it however they want. Yeah, right? I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And we just ducked in. If we're talking Last Dance, I'll use another basketball analogy. We sold kind of like a 3-point shot. The ball leaves the fingertips at the buzzer. Any bit later may not have happened. But we were fortunate to sell in June of 16 when M&As were really kind of fading out in our business. There was a huge rush to buy up companies like ours, like from 2010 to 2016. So we were one of the last ones in. but we were purchased by ProSiebenSat.1 Red Arrow Group, a German company, and they have built a consortium of production companies, 21 total, and I think we were like the 21st. And to do just that, to basically acquire companies with all this content so that they could put it into all their distribution pipelines, international, multiple different ways. And so, yes, we were fortunate, but at the end of, that was our 32nd year in production, was quite a reward for all the hard work for 3 decades. So
have there been any other synergies that have come to you guys as a result of that acquisition?
Well, and access to the global market for sure. Throughout this year, because this year is just such a wash, but up until 2016 through 19, the ability to tap into markets, and formats. Formats are content that are based on, think of game shows or, like The Masked Singer, that's a format, or The Amazing Race, or, Survivor. Those are formats. And what we do is we look for those formats in foreign countries that do really well. There's some markets like Japan, they do fantastic formats. Israel, leaders in formats. And then we'll go there and we'll acquire the rights to their format and then adapt it and sell it in the U.S. marketplace. That's a real good business model, because most of the formats today, if you look at on the network side, the major networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, most of those formats are foreign formats that have been adapted to the U.S. marketplace. So,
one of the things the show The Good Doctor has an interesting thing. It says adapted from this Korean show, and that's not a normal thing. We don't normally see that, for those kind of programs. But it must have been a show that was done overseas, and then they liked the idea and they brought it here. And do they just translate the script verbatim, or they start from scratch with the idea?
You have to, there's a lost in translation maybe in some of the storylines, so you have to adapt it. But some things need no adapting. One of the biggest franchise, America's Funniest Videos, was a Japanese format that was brought here. Basically, you're looking at people's home videos of them slipping and falling and cats flipping and things like that. That, I think it's still on the air. And that was basically a simple Japanese format. Wipeout, the show where people are getting hit by, things and knocked over and so on, a foreign format. American Ninja Warriors, same thing, a big format overseas that was brought over here. So some things don't need adaptation. If you're running through an obstacle course, I think it works in most every language. But if it's something like The Good Doctor or something that's scripted, they're going to have to, make it more, palatable to the U.S. marketplace.
This is a fascinating thing, and I think that what our listeners have to do is they have to adapt and generalize some of what you're saying about how you approach either studios, and then how studios or networks approach their millions of viewers. Businesses have to do something similar to that, and it's not easy to do, but for me, the inside track, what I hear you saying, the best, smartest, and fastest way for you and your business, it's about, number one, on the selling side, it's about curiosity. Curiosity is a big time word. Ultimately, you're very focused on the fact that you're producing content and you're protecting your brand. And those were really the kind of the big takeaways for me. And they're not that different, by the way, that from many other companies. Other companies have similar concerns, but they have to generalize what you've said really into their environment, which is quite fascinating. So I did have one more question, and that is, do you think with the changing, like the convenience is king thing, do you think a 30-minute format is still going to keep working, or are they looking at changing, the way that they carve up time and so forth?
So it depends on the genre. Some formats are what they're called snackable. They work best as 30-minute formats. They're kind of light fluff filler. They work well.
30 minutes is a snackable?
It's snackable. You pop in, you pop out. It's wallpaper in the background during the day. A lot of networks are snackable, like Home and Garden, the Food Network. They just put on these shows, flip this, make that kind of shows. Not to say they're not. I mean, they're some of the most popular shows on television. They're on most of the time in our house. But those formats really work well. What you're getting now is a real interesting thing because everybody left cable. Where did people go? Where did the eyeballs leave? You're getting now networks in a little bit more of a desperate mode. And how do you keep people? So now they're increasing orders from 1 hour, half hours to 1 hour to even 2 hours. In other words, let's not put 2 1 hours together. Let's make a big 2 hour special because we don't want people to leave. We want them to stay engaged in the show. And the problem with that is not all content travels well as a 2 hour format. We tried it on Pit Bulls and Parolees. And, you get it. She rescues, she adopts, she's got family problems and solutions. It works really well as an hour. We tried it this season as 2 hours and it didn't work. So,
there are a lot of shows that are 2 hours that would like 2020 to some of these that could be a lot more interesting in 1 hour. They drag them on and they just, the cadence isn't right. And there's just something that's, listen, I don't have an eye for it. I'm not suggesting I do, but my sense as a consumer is that some of these things, they just drag on and they use 2 words when they could use one and it just goes on. So.
Yeah. Netflix, which has been such an explosive hit, they have it down to metrics, right? Where their executives have actually told us in our shows, something has to happen every 7 to 8 minutes. You're either surprised, you're laughing, you're crying, it's just kind of this short attention span theater, they've just figured it out. And, the time, it could be an hour, it could be 40 minutes, it could be 36 minutes, whatever is best for the show. Because again, they don't have the commercial breaks that you're having to deal with in cable. 6 episodes is about right. Sometimes they picked up 8 and they just get a little light there in the middle and people they need you to complete every episode. So completion rate is huge. If you turn on Netflix and you watch 20% of a show and then you go, nah, that's not for me, and you turn it off, that's not a success for them. So they need high completion rate for their shows. So they broke it down to a science on viewing.
Well, that's what those technology people are great at, is those metrics. But I wonder how many business people, how many of our listeners could take the concept of something happening every 7 or 8 minutes and adapt it into their sales process, or adapt it into their marketing process, or adapt it into some of their human resource processes. I just wonder if it's possible to take that concept and move it over into other kinds of businesses. I bet it is. What about the money? I mean, these networks are selling commercials. People are kind of tired of commercials. If these things are snackable and people are making dinner and they're not really watching, they're walking around, then the advertisers certainly have to be saying, we don't really want to be attached to something that's snackable or that's not really getting people's attention. So what are these studios looking for, the networks looking for their revenue streams going forward?
That's an excellent question. Hence the move now by Discovery and these networks to streaming. I think the deal that Discovery is doing is with Verizon. So they've kind of built in their platform with an advertiser. It's no different than what television was like in the 50s with the Dinah Shore, support branded show. I mean, advertising has driven cable. We joke sometimes, our shows are basically filler for the ads, because they're so important.
Well, that's what newspapers are. Newspapers is a bunch of filler so that they can have a place to put advertisements. And the more content they have, the more pages, the more they can sell ads. So, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing, but that's how that works there too.
So you're going to see more towards subscription models, on demand charges, things of that nature that start to get around some of the advertisers. Because, again, I do think people's times we're spending it differently. Our rhythms are different. We pandemic aside, we're pretty active as a human race. We run around and travel and so on. So finding good content at our disposal, and again, it's a balance. It has to be good content, but that's going to be a big driving force in the industry that I'm in.
So last question, what's on the plate for you going forward? You got any good stuff in production now?
Oh man. Well, let's see. Producing in 2020 has been, as I said earlier, necessity is the mother of invention. We've had to get very, very.
Listen, maybe you can launch into animated activities.
Yeah. We've got a bunch of interesting things. We've got a new series on TLC called Transplant Unit, which is really amazing, really uplifting, basically about transplants and people's lives, and pretty remarkable storytelling. It's partnered with Robin Roberts from ABC. We've got Nightwatch coming back on A&E, 25 episodes in New Orleans. Those are the first responders who rush into harm's way to keep people safe. So we're really proud of that. We do this Hollywood Medium show for E! With Tyler Henry. That's coming back on now on Netflix, where he's going to be touring the country, giving readings, and really, if you believe in that stuff, it's pretty amazing. It's kind of crossing over, into the other side. And then some other things that we're really excited about. We hope that 2021 will be, we'll be able to leave the cave, and get back out into the world and travel and tell stories that we've been telling for 36 years. So.
Well, listen, look forward to hearing more of your stories, and what a great guest you have been. What a remarkable success story you are. You're creative and smart, and you just made a lot of cool stuff happen. So thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your wisdom with us here this morning.
No worries. Nice talking to you, Joe.
Thanks, man.
You've been listening to Profit from the Inside with Joel Block. For more insights and to learn more, visit joelblock.com.
How about a shout out and a huge thanks to our podcast show producer, David Wolf, and the team at Audavita Studios. Profit from the Inside wouldn't be possible without these wonderful professionals. To learn more or to find out how you can launch and produce your own podcast show, reach out to www.audavita.com. That's AUDIVITA.com.